Welcome to another edition of the Badass Entrepreneurs Club, where we explore the truth of the entrepreneurial journey. I'm your host, Dr. Mulrooney, and I'm excited to have with us today Lauren Weinberg, who is working in what I would consider life architecture, which is something that came up in one of our discussions. So I'm really excited to hear her journey and have her share what she knows about what it takes to be an amazing entrepreneur. Welcome, Lauren.
So happy to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So how did you get the entrepreneurial bug? Because some people are entrepreneurs from the time they're 3 years old. Some of them get it later in life. When did that start for you?
So it definitely didn't start when I was 3 years old. In fact, it was never my intention. Originally, I went to school to become a psychologist and a family therapist, and was planning on being a professional and did that for years. And then as life would have it, I chose to be home to help raise my children. And it just felt like where I needed to be. And I was home for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was becoming what I call a free bird. I don't like to say empty nester because it sounds like you're bereft of something, and I felt like it was a really possibility for me as well as for my children. So when I was becoming a free bird, I, knew that I wanted to go back into the workforce and decided to go back and become a coach, became a certified coach. And I'm actually board certified. So I, did a lot of schooling. So there was a lot of prep leading up to that. And I trained at Duke University in their Department of Integrative Medicine to become a health coach. And what they were really training people for was to become sort of an adjunct. I think that they would have been happy if most of us would have become like an adjunct support for integrative medicine practices, where we help people make the changes that are recommended maybe by the doctors or something. But that part wasn't right for me. What I realized going through all of that and figuring out what I loved about this part of my life felt like I needed to share the message as I saw it, as it made sense to me. Mm-hmm. And through all of that, I realized that what I was being called to do was to be what a lot of people call like a subset of entrepreneurship, which is a solopreneur. And it is a subset of entrepreneurship. I mean, it's except that everything's on you. So
can't blame anyone but yourself.
It's all about you. And I listened to a great discussion today about, your personal brand versus your business brand and how close that relationship is really when you're a solopreneur. It's almost one and the same. It's not, but it's almost one and the same. Right. And figuring that out and figuring out how to put myself out there, make myself available, find my way to serve, to help other people. That's been, the most challenging and interesting, part about it for me, because it is a whole new world. And when you're trained as a professional, nobody really teaches you Business 101. And the courses that you're called to take, much more about, the process and the product of what you're doing and not necessarily about how to put it out there. So it is, relatively recent journey for me, and one that I'm finding challenging in all the best ways.
So with what you're doing right now, give us a little bit of description on how you work with people, because I want to pull out the lessons that you're learning from your clients and that you're learning yourself that you're bringing to the table for them.
I'm so glad you asked that, because it's so interconnected. Truly what I do when I help people, I call myself the becoming coach. Why? Because we're always in a process of becoming, right? So whether you are an entrepreneur or in some kind of leadership position, or you're not working at all, I mean, we are all on our own journey and process of becoming. And it's about becoming your very, I don't want to say your best self, I don't believe in that, but becoming a better version of yourself is about learning to love and accept yourself just as you are. Mm-hmm. All the flaws, all the parts of you that you wish maybe were different, truly appreciating those as opportunities as well, and all the strengths and positive parts, being able to feel worthy and deserving of what you have in your life.
Mhm.
And that, attitude for myself, I had to question all those things about myself as I embarked on this part of my journey. What did it mean to me? Where were my pitfalls? What was holding me back? What are my blocks?
Right.
I have to look at that. A lot of people have issues around money, right? And being able to charge for things, especially when you're a helping person, you're in a helping profession,
Yes.
you often feel that, oh no, this is so important. I'm going to give it to you for free. I'm just going, here, just take it. But,
Sure.
it's all about, to me, understanding that you're worthy and deserving of valuing yourself in this space. And so
Yes.
that's been a journey for myself as well, like learning to appreciate what I'm good at and not good at,
Mhm.
just like I help
So
my clients to do.
I'd like to ask you where that not charging comes from, because it's a problem that I see, especially in the healthcare space. And someone who's on a journey like me, so they went from having this set profession to
Mhm.
moving into a coaching space or moving into a just completely different profession where they're trying to be that solopreneur or small business owner, but they keep undervaluing themselves. And if someone blinks at their price, they're like backpedaling on it and going, well, I can do it for this instead. And so before the person has even objected, they're doing the objection for them because they're assuming there's an objection there. And that creates exactly what you talked about, either doing it for free or giving a discount that wasn't really necessary. So
Mhm.
is there something that you've identified in your clients that you consistently see why that is happening, and where did that originate from in their life?
Frankly, I've learned a lot listening to Jen Sincero's book. You're a badass, as you could relate. You're a badass at making money. I don't know if you know that book, but you share some, lingual synthesis there. And and just even exploring that for myself, like understanding that people have money histories. I think, how your family dealt with money, how the kinds of messages, money is one of those things that are integral to how we were raised.
Mhm.
Every family, whether overt or covert, has messages around money. And whether you were raised with this sort of abundance mentality, like there will always be enough, do what you need to do, spend on yourself, you are worth it,
Mhm.
or, no, money is scarce. We have a scarcity mentality. There's never going to be enough of it. Be incredibly frugal. Or maybe even things like, oh, people who have money are snobs, or money is dirty. Like you can't get anything worthwhile through money. All those messages are there, whether we're really aware of them or not. And it's important to unpack that. Personally, I'm fine charging for what I bring to the table.
Mhm.
I truly believe that, as Jen Sincero talks about it as well, that money is an energy. It's not a thing in and of itself. Like we give it its value, but it creates this energy. And I believe that if you truly want to invest in yourself, then paying into that investment helps to bring the energy that you need to make the changes that you're looking for. And it's a commitment. So my clients pay me up front. And I think that's important because change doesn't happen in a straight line,
Mhm.
right? There's twists and turns. And sometimes you're really excited and you make a lot of steps forward. And then life gets busy and gets in the way, and we slide back into our old habits. And then you say, oh my God, well, this isn't working. Well, it's not that this isn't working. It's just that you kind of slid back into those old pathways, and you need to make that concerted effort to move forward. So by making that monetary and energetic commitment to yourself up front, it pushes you through those times that are difficult to navigate, through
Mhm.
those times where you're not seeing as much change.
Right.
And ultimately, it helps to keep you on the path and moving forward.
Mhm. And from the entrepreneur's side, like, let's think about it. When
Mm.
you have given it away or given it for less than you should have, how often do you feel a little bit resentful of that, or used, or you're annoyed that the person isn't taking it seriously, right? there's not often a win-win situation happening there. And at the end of the day, you kind of go, oh, you're kicking yourself for doing it again. And if you've done it once, you've probably done it 10 or 20 times. And so we need to start learning those lessons of exactly what you talked about. I was reading this book this week called The Culture Code, and it's quite interesting. It talks about all different kinds of things of like how we think about sex in different countries, and how we think about money in different countries, and how we think about this and that. And it really unpacks a lot of what you're talking about with our blocks around things. And honestly, for most entrepreneurs, I really think you should be reading that book, because it is fascinating. You'll just be like light bulbs going off everywhere as you read it, because it makes so much sense as to why a certain client is a certain way, why a team member is a certain way, even family members and whatnot. So digging into that, I think, is really important. And it sounds like that's something that you're doing a lot with the clients that you're working with, which is awesome.
Oh my God, understanding people's culture and background is so important. Certainly harkens back to my days of training as a psychologist. I mean, that's one of the primary things that you have to look at. What are the belief systems that come to you just based on the culture in which you were raised? So important. But you said something that I think is really important. I've been thinking a lot about this week. You talked about the blocks. What are these blocks that we have? And I feel very strongly about what I'm about to say. We can focus on the blocks that we have. Or I think of it like a pipe. Here, let me give you this metaphor as like a pipe. All right. So if you have a pipe and everything's flowing through the pipe, that's great. But there might be a point in the pipe where it narrows. And then if there's anything heavy that's traveling down that pipe, any kind of block that you might be carrying, at some point it's going to get stuck, right? Where the rubber meets the road, where like where that pipe narrows, that block is going to get stuck. You have a choice then. You can work on chipping away at the block and staying focused on the block, or you can work on widening the passageway, expanding the passageway. To me, that's like expanding the passageway is looking at the positive, what you can control, what you're worth, like working on, if you have these issues around money, you can delve deep into these issues around money, or you can start working on understanding the positive exchange of energy that comes from money and widening that passageway. It's just a choice in how you want to look at things. But our brains are wired such that what we focus on is what we see. Right. Again, you want to focus on the block, you're going to be focusing on negativity. You're going to be focusing on what isn't, what you don't have, the lack that there is. Or if you focus on, widening the pipe, you're going to be focusing on the positivity, on the upside of what there is, on the worth, on the value. So that's a choice.
Interesting, because I thought when you started this pipe analogy and something getting stuck, I was like, oh, we leave the block behind and focus on what kept flowing forward, is where I thought your head was going to be at. So it's interesting to hear the other perspective on that.
Well, because maybe nothing's flowing forward, right? If something's a block, there might be nothing getting around, or certainly there's going to be a lot less pressure behind it. There's going to be a lot less oomph and excitement around it. You got to make it so that you widen that pipe, and that block will go. It's just going to go on its own.
With the clients that you work with, when you're helping them to really figure out like how to redesign your life, you and I had a pretty deep discussion about this. Like, people like me, hyper type A, we are just pushing. And we're looking to someone like you to be able to help us to keep pushing at 200% into infinity. And it's something that's not realistic, but it's something that we so strive to be able to be, that superhuman person. But it turns into so many other issues, relationship issues, health issues. It really can completely destroy your life psychologically as well. So how are you helping people to shift that perspective from reaching to be superhuman, which is completely unrealistic, to actually being able to design their life to make the most of it and still be that high level performer without making ourselves sick in all different areas of our life?
That's a great question. People often think that if they aren't striving, if they take their foot off the gas, then it means that they're not going to try to reach those accomplishments and make those incredible things happen in their life. It's not true. Turns out not to be true. Actually, taking the foot off the gas pedal gives you a chance to recharge those batteries, right? You keep just going, that battery's going to run out. And then no matter how much you want to reach that next plateau, that next stop on the journey, you're going to run out of charge, just have nothing left. So it's important, we are raised, our culture, understanding our culture, didn't read the book that you mentioned, but I'm sure it gets at the fact that our culture values people who just go, right? You get so many accolades. Oh, you push through, you pull 24-hour, you get so many wow, you rock, man, you're the best.
Yeah.
And that is a recipe, like I said, for burning out, for that battery emptying. We're not human doings. I know that I'm not the only one to say this. A lot of people say this. We are not human doings, we're human beings. And learning how to just be is super important. That if you want to understand what is important in your life, you have to just stop at times. You have to learn to just be, right? It's part of becoming. You have to learn to be in your space, in your head, where you can just settle in and wait to see what is important to you. Figure it out. What do you want in your life? What do you really enjoy? What are the things that you value? I can't tell you how many people say, oh, I value my family above anything. And then you say, well, how are you spending your time? Well, I really, work probably 6 days a week and 12 hours a day. And well, how exactly are you valuing your family? You're telling me that's important to you, but your behavior is not matching up. That's going to grate on somebody's satisfaction and their happiness in their life. There has to be a match between what you value and what you're doing in your life, how you're showing up. Energetically, how you're showing up with how you spend your time. So what I do is help my clients to take the foot off the gas. I help them slow down enough to say, what is important to me? How do I want to be in this world? Not just who do I want to be, but how do I want to be? What is the energy I want to show up with? How do I want other people to experience me? How do I want to spend my time? How do I want to take care of my body, myself, my body, my mind, my spirit? Those are the things that build true satisfaction in life that can lead toward creating happiness in life.
So I hear a lot of people say, they are afraid to actually stop pushing so hard, because it's like, well, I've got so much momentum right now, and if I stop, I'm going to just roll backwards. And I remember in dental school in my 3rd year, I fractured my leg really badly. I had pins and plates put in, and the doctors wanted me to take a month off school. And I'm like, but what if I end up not finishing with my year and I get pushed back a year because I'm falling behind? So it's ridiculous. But I ended up sitting with patients with my foot up on a stool beside their head and had my other foot on the gas pedal for the drill, and worked. And so I made sure that I actually could get my leg up and let that recover, but still was able to keep pushing forward. And that has happened over and over and over again in my life. So it's one of those patterns that is really hard for me to undo. And even if I'm on vacation, I'm like, but I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And I am very much involved in that North American mindset that I have to be that sacrificial lamb, and I want my little badges of honor on my arm that I worked so hard. And it is the hardest thing to break. For the people that you're working with, what is usually that light bulb moment? So we're saying we want all these things, but our actions speak so much louder than what we're saying. But there has to be that point where that light bulb goes on and they go, okay, this is worth it to take the foot off the gas and actually work on these things and put that focus on these things that I want. What is that tipping point?
I'm going to answer that question. But first, I'm listening to you and you're saying it happens over and over again. And it's not surprising. I feel like we end up in situations, the same kind of situations over and over again for a reason, because we have things to learn in those situations. And I know that you've broken yourself a few times, right? I mean, talk about a message from the universe that, you got to slow down or make a change. And I think that the light bulb, all right, let's get to the light bulb. The light bulb is when that locus of value moves from outside of us to inside of us.
Okay.
So when we are striving like that, when we're pushing and striving for those badges of honor, for the accolades, for everybody to say, oh, what a good girl, you're doing such a great job, look at you, you're a superwoman, like that stuff is getting all your goodies from outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
What I help my clients do is to look inside, because once you truly value yourself, once you truly learn to love yourself, it sounds so cliche,
Mm-hmm.
but it made the biggest difference in my life. I heard Tara Brach say on a podcast, although I felt like she was speaking just me, but you are, this is what I learned that day from Tara Brach. It changed everything. You are the love of your life. And what I realized at that moment is that we are always striving because we have these holes in us, right? The best, well-intentioned, most loving parents, there's still holes that you're going to have. Very few people escape childhood without some sort of, emptiness somewhere, some piece that's missing of the puzzle. And we look outside of ourselves to fill up that hole. Once you can learn to love yourself and fully accept yourself, you stop looking outside.
Mm-hmm.
You stop judging yourself. And the reason you used to work so hard is because you worry about the judgment of others. Once you stop judging yourself, you stop worrying about the judgment of others. And then miraculously, the best bonus part of this is you stop judging others.
Mm-hmm.
You think about how much of our mental time is taken up by judging other people or comparing ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
other people. It is just heart-opening and completely freeing when you learn to accept, when you just learn to accept that you are good enough the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds easy to say, it's easy to understand it here. It's getting it here, inside, that really makes the difference.
And so I understand the realization and the external versus the internal part. Is there kind of an age range, and is there a gender difference as well that this tends to happen, that light bulb goes off?
No. No. It's when you take the time to do it. It's when anybody takes the time to do it. And it's funny because there is so much push. A lot of people think if I'm talking about self-love, that it means that I'm working with women only. Yeah. And only women are interested in this message of self-love. It's not true. There are plenty of men who relate to what it is that I'm saying. And even more who maybe would like to give themselves permission to go there. But again, they're caught up in that cycle of this external judgment, and they don't make the leap to giving themselves permission to go there. Mm-hmm. But it's available to anyone. Partly what I'm interested in doing is reaching a younger audience, helping them get to this realization sooner, mm-hmm. so that they're not waiting till they're in their 50s like I was to figure out, I call it how to build themselves a boat. Like I say that in life, I felt like I was just like, I jumped in the river of life and got like bumped around by the tide and, sort of held on to the rocks as they drifted past. But it wasn't until I was 53 years old that I learned to build a boat, mm-hmm. right? And what is this boat built of? It's built of asking yourself these deep questions. What's important to you? What are the values? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses and how can you accept them? Like all those incredible questions, mm-hmm. that help you understand yourself. That's the boat. Mm-hmm. And look, I did it when I was in my 50s. And anybody can do it at any time that they are willing to sit and do the work. But I'm hoping younger people, and I think the younger generations, coming up, that millennial, that Gen Y, that Gen Z, whatever the newest one, like I think these are the questions people are starting to ask themselves, mm-hmm. before they just sort of like get caught up in that river of mm-hmm. life, before they get on that treadmill where they can't really see another way off.
Mm-hmm. And that was one thing I wanted to ask you is like, is there generational differences? Because I know my generation, people who are telling us to slow down were like, you're just being lazy. you know, as we keep running in our own little direction. We're just like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And then I think we hit like late 30s, early 40s, and then we go, oh, yeah, I should have been listening to you, because you're totally right that you know exactly what you were talking about. And so I think our generation is a little bit late to the table. And I know the millennials get so criticized, but I think they're them trying to take care of themselves at an earlier age and set things up properly and really architect their life properly earlier on is something that we need to learn from them, and not be like, oh, they just don't think they have to climb the corporate ladder and all these funny things that we say, which are really our judgment again on them. And I think sometimes it might be a little bit of jealousy from the older generations going like, oh, I wish I'd realized that then instead of realizing it later in my life, and I could have had a much more fulfilling and juicy life than what I've done. So do you find the millennials are seeking this, or they're just more open-minded to it at this point?
I think they're seeking it. I mean, if you look at the statistics, you know, the majority of millennials want to work in an industry or in a corporation or whatever that values work-life balance. They want people to be asking those questions. They want to work places where they have opportunity to show up as their whole self. I mean, these are, it sounds like gobbledygook from people that, you know, are, and I love how you're lumping me into your generation. Thank you. But it, you know, it feels, I mentioned this to some people that I know, and they're like, what? Nobody cares what they want. Get the job done. I'm paying them to get the job done. They could worry about them on their time. And we're starting to crack that open. You know, those things that were considered soft skills. I mean, nothing brought it into sharp focus like 2020. You know, I call it that was the 2020 vision. When you looked at the gifts of what we went through in that last year, you know, part of it is that we're understanding how someone's life impacts their quality of work. And their quality of work impacts their life. They are inextricably linked. I mean, we call it life, but we spend more time at work than any other part of our life, right? If you consider that we're asleep for most of the time that we're home, the majority of the time. So, you know, work is super important. I think that next generation truly values that, and they're looking to do it differently. And I know when I speak to groups that are younger, they're just, they can't get enough. They want more. They're like, what? Confidence, calm, connection? Like, what? How do I get more of that? What did you do to become confident? Like, they're feeling the same thing that we all felt. They're just willing to do something about it sooner.
And are they more willing to talk about it? Because for my generation, my parents' generation, like my grandparents' generation was like, don't tell anyone what's going on inside you. Like, then they're going to know that you're weak. And so we just like super pushed, we squashed everything down. And then it suddenly starts boiling up when there's just too much pressure in there. So is that part of the difference with the generation too, is they actually just, they're more open about it?
I think they are.
Yeah.
Go listen to Clubhouse. Go listen, go take a look at, I don't know so much about TikTok, but look at the other social media. I think people are willing to say, you know what? Yesterday was a bad day. I had a bad week. I have a lot going on. I'm still showing up. I'm still getting my stuff done, but I need a little grace. You know, I think they're willing to make it known publicly and privately. I mean, I see, my children, certainly my daughter, shares all of that with her friends. I think that, looking, how can I support you, is just part of the vernacular for them.
Interesting. So what are some of the biggest lessons we can learn as entrepreneurs to try to unbreak some of the really broken patterns that we have created in our world that make us feel like we have to keep pushing? Let's go. Do you have like maybe 3 that you could mention?
Sure. The first is understand what's important to you. Like, know your values, right? And I heard somebody say it today. They had a beautiful way of describing what they do. They, said something about making the soul of your business the business of your soul. I mean, not to be too esoteric or too woo-woo, but to me, what that resonates as is know what's important to you and how you're going to bring that into your business. So are you going to insist that people, and yourself included, work 80 hours a week versus 40? Like how do your values show up in your business? The other is to be a good example of that. You can't tell your workforce, take care of your mental health, and then not do it yourself, right? Gary Keller in The One Thing, who's from Keller Williams, he started Keller Williams, and he talks for the whole first half of his business book. He talks about how he broke and ended up in the hospital. And, you're at risk then of losing everything. I mean, ultimately, you have to show up in a way that's going to be good for you. I mean, you're building this wonderful thing. You're taking the time to build this wonderful thing. If you don't take care of yourself, at some point you will break. And then everything crumbles, right? Or is at risk of crumbling. And the third thing, maybe just breathe. For everybody, I cannot say this enough. Take time to pause and breathe. And I mean that both literally and figuratively. Literally breathe. That's the one thing that people don't do enough when they're rushing. They shallow breathe. It leads to anxiety. It leads to not being able to think clearly, all this rush of negative chemicals in your body. Breathe deep into your belly every day, even for a couple of minutes. That's literally breathe. Or if you're in a tense situation, it can be cooled down just by taking a deep breath. But metaphorically, let breathe remind you to sit in meditation, sit in journal, sit in nature, just sit quietly and reflect what's going well, what's not going well, what do you want more of? What do you need? Who else can come and on this journey with you and support you? What do you need to take care of yourself to move forward?
It's interesting. The meditate thing is something that I was very resistant to. And I know a lot of high level professionals are as well, because like, oh, I can't sit still. Running is my meditation, or doing something where I'm still pushing very, very hard is my meditation. And I was talking to my boyfriend about this because he's got an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. And his 11-year-old is super in tune with the world, right? She's quiet, she's an observer. And I was talking to him about the potential in the brain, which I think like if we have our little ones actually meditating and opening up more of their brain, because I know when I do it, slowly little pockets of realization happen. There's observation of things that I wouldn't have seen before because I had my blinders on. I can only imagine what will happen if we have this younger generation making these realizations, like the kids, but also the millennials and even my generation. We still got a lot of years to live. If we can be opening ourselves to taking that time to breathe and observe and meditate, how it could actually have a massive effect on how we influence the world moving forward.
I truly believe that the energy we all bring to the table influences the energy that's out in the world. I know that, again, that sounds a little out there for many people, but I believe it's true. I believe that we're all connected, like the mountains are all look separate, but they're all connected to the earth. And, the energy that we bring anywhere we show up impacts the other people. Thankfully, they are teaching kids to meditate in school now. It's like widespread. It's becoming more of a thing all the time, starting in elementary school. The energy those kids are going to bring to the table is going to be completely different by the time they grow up and are in the positions that we're in. And it will, I believe it truly will help to repair the world. I do. And there's 23,000 ways to meditate. And everybody thinks you have to just sit and say Om and, clear your mind, but there's not. There's so many different ways to do it. And some of them are a movement. Some of them do involve, you can actually do a running meditation. If you just keep bringing your attention back to the sound of your foot on the ground, on the gravel, or the sound of what you're listening to, or your breath, you can. It's okay. There's so many different ways to do it. People think it's something that other people do, but there's a way for everybody to do a little something.
Absolutely. Is there anything you want to add before we head out today, Lauren?
Again, I think just to reiterate that, this journey of life architecture, of creating a life that you love to live, starts with the journey of learning to love yourself. And I just wish everybody success on that journey. just truly understanding and accepting, warts and all, you.
For sure.
Mhm.
Well, on that note, if anyone is looking for help to actually redesign their life to be a little bit healthier so that they can have that work-life balance while still being an overachiever, how can they reach out to you, Lauren? We can't let them away with not being an overachiever, so you'll let them keep that to some extent, right?
The irony is, like, the more you go inward, the more you have to bring to the table outward. So it's a win-win. Honestly, this is a win-win situation.
Yeah.
And people can find me at lastingchangecoach@gmail.com, or my website is www.lastingchangewellness.com.
Perfect.
And I'd love to chat with anybody.
Absolutely. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you share your wisdom with us today on the Badass Entrepreneurs Club. Thank you again for taking the time and sharing your journey.
Thank you for having me. It's my
You're welcome.
pleasure.